Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, and it's good to be talking about this particular brand. I think there's much that we can learn from Mercedes-Benz. Without a doubt, it is one of those brands that people seem to understand and appreciate some of the prowess of the brand, not least of which is a long-standing history of being innovators in design. They are credited as creating the first of the automobile, and that dates back to Carl Benz, and clearly that history and legacy of innovation goes beyond just the initial efforts to make sure that the vehicle is in existence. And certainly a lot of the safety features and many of the innovations we've come to know have been championed by Mercedes. I litanize a lot of them in the context of the book, but suffice it to say they continue to be working on engineering feats that make this 2,000, 3,000 pound vehicle into really a supercomputer that we move around in space and really increase greater levels of safety for all of us. Additionally, Mercedes-Benz, particularly in the United States, has been a brand that is known for being one of the best places to work. If you look at Fortune magazine's listing of the best places that people can work, you'll find Mercedes on that list perennially. The truth of the matter is that Mercedes-Benz is the only OEM, to my knowledge, the only original equipment manufacturer of automobiles that consistently makes the best places to work list. And this is really born out of the problems that came about after the Chrysler-Mercedes-Benz merger and the failure of that merger. And there was a lot of morale issues that had been affected. There were some quality issues that had been affected. And so in an effort to respond to all of that, they really invested a lot in making the workplace more engaging, more purposeful for their people. Beyond that, I think most of us would recognize that Mercedes-Benz is a phenomenal marketer. They know who their target audience is. They know what their target audience wants to do in their lifestyle, and they position messages there. They sponsor events, particularly sporting events, whether it's in the golfing sector or the tennis sector, that are very much associated with the people who buy their vehicles. And their brand promise is to be best or nothing. So that is what they claim to do. And because of that, many of us want to aspire to be the best in our areas. They become a very benchmarkable brand as well. And I should note that the strengths of any brand are often their greatest weaknesses. If you do your SWOT analysis, often you flip your strengths and you see your threats there. Because in getting strong about something, you have the potential to over-focus on that. And if the marketplace has some other inflection points, you can find yourself in some trouble. And certainly for Mercedes-Benz, that really is where they were. When it came to product innovation and product engineering, clearly they were at the top of their game. When it came to engineering experiences that engaged customers, that was not so much the case. So you ended up with dealerships in the United States in particular where individuals were having very average experiences at best. When you bought a car or when you had your car serviced, you didn't say, wow, that was best or nothing. You know, it certainly wasn't the best experience I've ever had. And you know, I've been in my career working for brands like Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company, where you clearly understand that is exactly what happens. There's a kind of highest level of hospitality that occurs in that part of the market, and so you couldn't put them anywhere close to other industries. And even within automotive, you were pretty much in the middle of the pack when it came to the rankings, particularly on external metrics that are of some prowess, such as the J.D. Power surveys. So with that in mind, Mercedes-Benz had to take a look at their overall delivery of customer experiences, and that's really what was the epigenesis for the book. You see this, the CEO for the company, Steve Cannon, who was in place during the major transformation phase of Mercedes-Benz in the United States. So let's kind of take a look at what we know about the importance of delivering customer experiences, not just at Mercedes-Benz, but why it's important for all of us to consider what Mercedes-Benz has to teach us about transforming our cultures and our service delivery. And it's important largely because much of the research globally says that leadership teams are placing this as a strategic priority at the level of about 92% of all leadership teams acknowledging that customer experience is and or should be a priority. Now this basically means that people have come to accept that you can only compete so much when it gets down to your product differentiation or even the benefits or attributes that your product give to your customer. So if you're going to be competitive in the marketplace today, you not only have to deliver a very outstanding product, but you have to deliver it in a way that gets it right and makes it right during the delivery process, but more importantly, that forms an emotional connection with your consumer. Otherwise, you're just chasing consumers day in and day out. You're constantly trying to coupon your way into the hearts and minds of customers, and that only lasts so long because someone else competes, again, on price and benefits. So if you're going to really differentiate, it comes down to the experience you deliver on top of the products that you deliver. Well, that's high priority, but in the United States, for example, we're seeing satisfaction rates at an all-time low or near all-time low. At least over the last 9 years of measuring, the American Customer Satisfaction Index suggests that presently we are near the bottom of customer satisfaction. So if we put those two things together, we know that we have to win the hearts as well as the minds of customers, and we know that we're not even satisfying customers consistently. We really have an opportunity to make change, and that's probably true in a global sense. Increasingly, global consumers are becoming less commoditized. They want something more than price and product benefits exclusively. If two things are equal when it comes to product and benefits, the brand that's more consistently able to deliver those products to market and create a connection with their customers is the brand that wins the day. So this need to shift from product to experience is something that Mercedes-Benz had to do over a 4-year period, and it's the focus of the book and the focus of our message today. And they really did it on the basis of understanding 3 key drivers: that in order to achieve a differentiated customer experience, you had to leverage your people, you had to leverage your processes, and your technology. So to that end, we'll take a look at what Mercedes-Benz, in fact, has done in pursuit of that journey. So this really starts with a clear vision of what the future looks like. And, you know, everyone in leadership talks about the importance of vision. I often suggest that the difference between a vision and a hallucination is how many people see it. And when it comes down to leadership, many people see it at the leadership level, but it isn't seen at the next level down and the next level down and out to a point where the customers are touched. So we're going to talk about how did Mercedes-Benz take a leadership vision and make it fully realized by the front lines. And beyond that, they then created a map of the customer journey. I've written now, I think, 7 business books about brands like Zappos and Starbucks and as I mentioned before, Mercedes, as I mentioned before, Ritz-Carlton. And what I can tell you is that through all those 7 books, even though I've been doing customer journey mapping most of my career, I'd never talked about the importance of journey mapping. And in this book I do, and really talk about how they went about mapping the journey of the customer. So I'm going to take you through that journey very quickly. Also, they were able to empower leadership at the front line and really help the front line understand what they wanted customers to feel, not only what they wanted them to experience in a checklist, right? Like, here's our operational excellence at touchpoint 1, here's our operational excellence at touchpoint 2. You can put those things on a checklist and you can measure against them, but the only way you can know whether or not you've delivered the full experience is by making sure you did those things plus asking the customer how they felt when they walked out the door. And so this was a brand that was driven to delight, and so delight was the outcome, and they taught people what were the ingredients and the steps in relationship to a customer that would help them walk out of a building and say, I was delighted by that interaction, or even how to design a website so that customers would say the same. They also realized that in order for customers to have an experience, the employees inside of the organization had to have a similar experience. So to that end, Mercedes-Benz spent a goodly amount of time helping employees appreciate what it took, and even non-employees. If you think about in the car business, the employees of Mercedes-Benz are those who are hired by Mercedes-Benz and get a paycheck from Mercedes-Benz. Most of the people who represent the brand are employed by dealerships, so there's these distributors. So how do you make sure the employees of the dealership are also delivering the Mercedes-Benz branded customer experience? And finally, how do you make sure you sustain it? And that even if you get some leverage and traction and start to become recognized as delivering a much improved customer experience, how does that really become part of your long-term brand? And how do you as a leader become known as leaving a legacy of great customer experiences? So with that in mind, we'll take a look at the very specifics of what it takes to make a vision seen. So Most leadership teams sit down at the beginning of a new regime, say a new CEO comes on board, and they'll go and do an offsite. I just did this recently with a international food brand and the CEO of that brand. And we did the offsite, and we kind of tried to identify what is the future. We looked at the SWOT analysis, the strengths, the opportunities, the weaknesses, and threats. And then we kind of flipped it around, and we took our threats and tried to find opportunities out of them. We took our weaknesses and tried to figure out how we can make them into strengths. And all of that goes into the ingredients. But at the end of the day, you often walk out of there and you come up with a communication plan, and you say, okay, this is what we're going to share, and here's how we're going to share it, and here's with which frequency we're going to share it, here's how we're going to stay on message, and you do all of that. But Mercedes did something a little bit different than what I've seen in many other situations. They literally had an artist there depicting what they were assessing. So if you look at the current state and the strengths and weaknesses and the opportunities and threats of the current state, they identify that on the left side of your screen as you look at it. And that current state included the fact that they had great brand recognition, they had amazing products, they had kind of upgraded their fleet of builds across the dealership and required the dealers to all have a very similar look and feel. Their sales were going successfully, and their customer experience wasn't terrible, it just wasn't remarkable. So they assess all of that, then they say, okay, what do we want to be by 2020? What do we want our brand to be, and how is that going to look, and what's that going to mean in terms of customer loyalty and the way customers talk about us, and really, are we satisfied with being the best in automotive, or are we aspiring to be a global standard? And they did all of that and ultimately created a visual image of what the future could look like. And then the most important thing is the gap that exists between the present and the future, and they built a bridge across that gap, and they had certain pillars on which that bridge was going to happen, and they created tactics and an action plan to get them started that they could imagine to see the future. They would develop internally customer experience champions. They would start mapping that customer journey. All those things are outlined in this map, maybe somewhat hard to see on your screen, and it's also available to you in the deck that I provided for your use later. Also, it's available on a website called driventodelight.com if you're interested in looking at it there. So suffice it to say, they created a visual depiction, and then they used this depiction over and over again. So we know a lot about adult learning theory. Some of us can listen to this webinar, and just the voice is what you're going to remember. Others of you are going to need the visual representation, but most of us learn through a multitude and multifactorial, multisensorial approach. So being able to depict it in imagery as well as articulate it verbally is what it takes to help people see it. And the more you present this visual map, and the more you say, okay, this is our initial view of it, but what else do you think we need on the action plan? Or in this big truck, this semi-truck on the bottom of the page, it says get rid of. What do you think we're going to also have to get rid of in order to make space for or give you room to achieve what we want to have happen? You just can't constantly add more and more to people and expect them to achieve your high priority items. What ends up happening is people pay attention to whatever they're being encouraged to do for a while, and some things start to slip. So in the past, whenever they tried to improve customer satisfaction scores, for example, they'd get a short-term increase for the time that they were emphasizing it, but not a long-term and sustained impact. So suffice it to say, to make the vision seen, they made it seeable, not just made it articulatable through verbal word. They unified what was being said and what was being seen. All right, so in kind of keeping with that, but more importantly, to get down to the granular level of where can we make improvements on behalf of customers, they really took the time, for the first time in their history, to look at all touch points in the customer journey, from pre-consideration of the product all the way to call to sequel. And by this, really they utilize the technology of customer experience mapping. And if you haven't done it with your customers, if you haven't spent the time with your teams to really look at your business from the customer's side of the cash register, then you really are missing out on something. Because what happens is, even when we try to make improvements from our side of the business, thinking about, well, customers might benefit from this or that or the other thing, we often make an improvement. We might make it 10% faster, but the customer might not even notice it, because the customer really never cared about that. That wasn't all that important to the customer. It was just something we knew we could improve. So this process was one where they wrote down all the contact points of customers before purchase. They did the same for the purchase and the post-purchase touch points, and they looked for the pain points, they looked for the gaps, they looked for the service challenges at every single one of those contact points. They looked at it from the customer's vantage point. What was this customer needing to have happen? What was their mission in this moment? What was the customer seeing, hearing? What would reduce the amount of effort the customer would have to expend at this particular moment in time? How will we know if the customer is satisfied at this moment? How would we know what emotion they're experiencing at this moment? And they basically worked through that process. They brought teams in. They had a big old war room with a bunch of butcher block paper all over the walls, and they were writing things down and talking about it. They were bringing in customer analytic data from market research and their own internal data, and they were saying, well, customers seem to want this. Let's imagine we're a customer. Let's put ourselves in their shoes. Let's really spend some time thinking about it from their point of view, not from ours. You're about to buy the car. What are you going to do? What are you going to see? And they went through that process very painfully, really, and painstakingly, and they ended up with a very detailed map. This is one, again, available on the website. High level of detail here, more than you want to know unless you're probably running a car dealership. And it really speaks to, loops and cycles, and when do we loop back in, and customers about to end the lease with the car, what's the optimal time for us to step back in and get them into another sales cycle, and it goes through all of that, and it's very helpful if you're at a strategic level trying to allocate resources. You definitely need to spend time and develop strategy specific to these touch points. But at the individual level in an organization, it's a lot more than you ever need to care about. So what they did is they took these circles and they broke up the pre-sales and the sales and the after-sales cycle, and they looked at all that's going on, all the multitude of steps, and they broke it down into very simplified wheels that every individual in the organization could look at. So let's assume that I work in a dealership, and maybe all I do is shag cars. I go out and grab a car and I bring it back and get it washed and make sure it's washed for a customer, whatever it might be. So what I'm to do is look at this wheel and say, well, how do I affect this particular process? So this is for the sales cycle. So if I'm someone just working in the office, and frankly I don't even interface with customers that much, maybe I'm someone who does the payroll for the dealership, where do I fit in? Do I, as I'm walking through the office, am I someone who actually creates a memorable first impression? Well, potentially I do. So I have to be aware that as customers walk in and I'm heading to my office, just whether or not I greet them on arrival, if I'm the first person to see them, can make a big deal of difference as to whether or not a customer feels as though a first impression was made that was favorable. Do I support people who allow these things to happen, and if so, am I taking care of people within the dealership, maybe the salespeople, so that they are feeling able to help create peace of mind on behalf of a customer? So what ends up happening is you take the very detailed map, you make it simpler, so there's line of sight. Every individual in the organization is asked to look at the wheels and say, where do you fit in? How do you contribute to ultimately creating and driving delight for customers? So transforming the detailed customer journey into an actionable wheel is the next step beyond creating a leadership vision, and then really helping people at the front line understand, what do you want customers to feel? Again, you can do all the processes right, but how do you want them to feel, and how do we get there? So they focused on this leadership concept, and by lead, it is the acronym listen, empathize, add value, and delight. And essentially, as much as we all think we know how to listen and we all think we know how to empathize, those things aren't all that obvious, really. A lot of the times we listen to respond. Someone says something, we listen just enough to make sure we can come up with a response that doesn't sound particularly inane. So as a result of that, there was a lot of training for everyone in the dealership on what it takes to listen. Listening is a lot about listening to understand, not to respond. And to understand, sometimes I have to clarify, so I have to ask more questions. So listening isn't a, okay, I'm listening, okay. It's much more about, okay, when did that happen? When did you first notice the sound? What else was happening at the time? Who else did you speak to? It's a lot about that kind of active inquiry. And so much training was done on that. It was also a lot of training done on what happens if we could listen as a team. What if you listened and you shared information with me, and I listened and I shared information with you, because we all have different different resources. So by listening as a team, we could bring different resources in as well. And then this notion of empathy, and with a lot of time spent on empathy. Empathy is really kind of the place between understanding what was said and acting on what was said. So if I understand your problem, before I launch into fixing it, I have a moment where I can connect with you as a human by hypothesizing how that problem might have felt to you. So if you share something with me, I could imagine, wow, you might have felt unsafe then after you had that particular thing happen. And so that willingness to say, maybe, as another human having emotions myself, I could possibly imagine someone feeling, that's the empathy. And much training was spent on that in the transformation of this brand to be driven to the light. And then the next level was, since a lot was invested in technology, and I'll talk about that in a minute, the notion was that in order for us as human beings to really deserve to be paid in the world in which we live today, we better be able to do something that machines can't do, or we'll be replaced by machines. I mean, in a real simple sense, if everything can get managed by technology, then people become less and less important to service delivery. So the main message, without quite that negative fear-based approach to it, was that you are human. You have the ability to do something that machines can't do. You have to bring that talent, that gift to every single interaction, every single time, no excuses. So what can people do that technology can't do? Well, obviously they can listen and empathize. Those are kind of inherently in there. But beyond that, what is the value you can add as a person? And I think sometimes it's as simple as greeting and welcoming somebody. It's the ability to say, wow, I'm glad to see you, and mean it. I mean, from an authentic place. Thank you for coming in my building. Without you, my paycheck is not made. Without you, I have no one to interact with. You give me an opportunity to be of service. That gives me purpose. Thank you. So sometimes it's as simple as just having that warmth, that connection that machines just can't do. Beyond that, I better be able to think and resource and problem solve and give solutions that machines may or may not be able to do. They may not be programmed in their algorithm to do. They should be able to fulfill my stated need, but they may not be able to anticipate my other needs. Now, I don't want to get into big debates about the ways in which software is trying to anticipate our behavior. Certainly, that's increasing. But as humans, we can think about other resources that we have in the business, and we can direct people in those ways. And if you just think about checking into a hotel using a kiosk, or checking into an airline for as a kiosk, you would hope that if you go to the counter and deal with a person, that person can do more than what the kiosk can avail you. If something gets complicated, if you want to change a flight and it's a very complicated flight change, you may want to go to that person and see if they can problem solve some options for you. So that's what add value was. And we believe that if you do all that, you ultimately delight customers, but it's also nice to send them off with a great thank you, to show your appreciation, to suggest something that might be of interest to them in the future. So lots of training on that. Now, this experience from the inside out notion is particularly important in a brand like Mercedes-Benz, where many of the people who work in the dealership don't drive Mercedes. They may want to, but they may not. That may not be the socioeconomic position that they're in. That dealer, who the person who works in the dealership doing payroll may not have the financial resources themselves to be buying Mercedes as their primary brand. So, interestingly enough, in the United States, we did some research, and about 70% of the people, based on this first training that was rolled out by Mercedes, about 70% of the people who worked in dealerships did not have substantial time behind the wheel of a Mercedes-Benz automobile. So because of that, the brand realized that there could be some misunderstanding, that the people who are the customers and the people who are the providers of the service may not be a lot alike. And I've run across this in the Ritz-Carlton. A lot of the people who provide service in Dubai, for example, are not necessarily the same people who are receiving service in a Ritz-Carlton in Dubai. So how do you help the people who deliver the service to understand and connect with the people who are receiving the service? Now, you could imagine somebody who may not have enough money to buy Mercedes on a regular basis thinking that people that do are just doing it for status or to be showy or have more money than brains or any number of conclusions a person could come to. So how do you make them realize that, hey, we're all just people, and most of the people who buy Mercedes-Benz do so because of the safety and because of the comfort and because this is an amazing automobile to drive. So to get them there, they actually literally created this program called Drive a Star Home, which allowed the employees of the dealerships to actually drive Mercedes for an extended period of time. And this involved literally renting cars to a rental, or having a rental company buy the cars and then having that rental company rent the cars back to the dealerships at the expense of the manufacturer. And that covered all kinds of liability issues in case an accident happened while someone was driving the car. So they had to go through this painful process, but ultimately they developed greater empathy. And the employees who drove these cars said, wow, I can't believe this is an amazing vehicle. All this time I had no idea. Now I better understand why somebody would want to buy it. And they were incredibly proud of the company that made those opportunities available to them. When the second year of the program, instead of just bringing cars to the dealerships and having people drive them for a few days, they literally brought them to the manufacturing plant in Vance, Alabama. So if you're working in a dealership somewhere in the United States, within 6 months of your employment, you have to you have the opportunity to go to the brand immersion experience. You go to Vance, Alabama. You see Mercedes being manufactured, precision manufacturing. You then also go onto the off-road track and take the sports utility vehicles off-road in these treacherous conditions that you would never come upon in real life driving. And then you go on a bank track, you take an AMG vehicle and you spin it around a bank track and see the high performance end of the vehicle. You get to see safety features demonstrated. You get to see the replicas of the first automobile, understand the long history and legacy of the brand, get immersed in all of that. And you also are taught how to take driven to lead, how to listen, empathize, add value, and delight to another level. Some additional things you can do, additional skills and tools to help you listen more effectively, empathize, add value, and delight. And as a result of that experience, you come away and you go, wow, this is extraordinary. Now, I just want to be really clear here. Not every brand has the wherewithal to ship people and develop brand immersion experiences, but what we almost all have the opportunity to do is to take some moments with all of our new hires and help them understand what we want to deliver from our place in the universe. Yes, you may have been working at the dry cleaner across the street last week and now you're working for me at my dry cleaner. Well, guess what? We want a different kind of experience than what you're used to delivering over there. So let me take a few moments to help you understand our legacy, how we were founded, what our core values are, what we believe people should have happen to them every single time. Let me make sure that we do a load of your dry cleaning here and you feel the value and the care and the concern we want in the product itself. Let me show you how I want to deliver it to you when you are my customer. So clearly there's an opportunity for all of us to do this in a much smaller scale. All right, so how do you make all of this happen in a way that's sustainable? Well, first off, you do really make sure you win the hearts and minds of your people by creating a vision. You help them see their line of sight and how they can improve individual care and even change processes along the customer journey. You teach them what you want the customer experience to be. You do all of that. But you really spend a lot of time saying, what's got to give for us to make this happen? And I think today people just feel like they're always asked to do more with less. Well, what if we were asked to do more with the same? What if we figured out how to give up some things in order to get some different things? And so for Mercedes, for example, in the United States, if you bought a Mercedes, you had roadside assistance for life. A tow truck would come and pick you up and take you back, or you'd get your car jump started, or whatever, your flat tire would get fixed. You'd have that for life. And that's kind of an interesting thing, right? Because you might have bought that car from someone else who bought it from someone else, so you never bought it from the dealer. You also may have never serviced it at the dealership. So you've been taking this car to your friendly local mechanic, but not a certified Mercedes-Benz dealer, and all of a sudden it breaks down on the side of the road and Mercedes is going to rescue you. Well, this is noble and fabulous and all, but it's really not a very wise use of that resource, right? If the goal here is to take care of people who are in relationship with you, not take care of people who have long since abandoned you as a brand. So they re-looked at this program, they put some conditions on it, and basically if you're in a relationship, you're getting service or you bought the vehicle from a dealer, then that roadside assistance is still in play. otherwise the money that would have been spent on that gets utilized in other ways in order to make sure that customers are engaged and delighted. The ones who are in relationship with the brand get those resources to build a stronger relationship, as opposed to those who've long since churned or never had a relationship with anything except a product. So this is something I think is important for all of us to look at. What is it we have to give up in order to deliver the kinds of experiences that we want to? And so the money that was used, that was saved from this, was used to take care of new buyers, people who were just coming into the sales cycle, who were buying the entry-level CLA. There were some enrichment programs provided to them so that they really said, hey, you know, you're just getting started with us. We want to make sure we really get you started on the right foot. We take care of you. If anything goes wrong, we'll take care of that for you in ways that we wouldn't have been able to do had we not leveraged those resources. The other thing about this is once they mapped out the journey, they listened very effectively at key touch points along the journey. They received customer feedback along the journey. And as a result of that, they really were able to make improvements. So if customers said, you know, we didn't like this happening, we don't like to stand in line to check out after we've met with our service advisor and we've had a repair done. We don't have to go over into a line and stand and pay. That feedback was used to develop online payment processes and other technologies that would allow a person to save time in those ways. And then finally, this brand looked at all of their technology and said, hey, how do we make it easy through technology? Mercedes somehow had for a while confused, I think, the notion that luxury means slow, that a luxurious experience means to move slowly and create a relaxed pace. And that's an old definition of luxury, and it's nice to luxuriate and relax and take your time. But in the world in which we live, luxury often means the ability to be up to go somewhere else and wait, not wait in the waiting room of a Mercedes-Benz dealership. So this focus on technology meant that they had Premier Express, faster service, that they had an integration of technology, the ability to do online scheduling, and everything would fall into place afterwards. You could schedule. If you needed a courtesy vehicle, that could all smoothly be streamlined in. And this is only going to get to be more relevant because the future of automotive is that cars are going to be interacting with their dealers, with the dealerships at all times. Big data is going to be leveraged. Two-way communication is going to be leveraged. And part of this was just moving away from a concept of VIN numbers, the vehicle identification numbers, to a customer identification number. So much as Apple ID is our email address, and it goes with us forever, and all of the products that we buy are attached to that ID, well, they're moving in the same direction with Mercedes. Instead of having the vehicle identification and trying to figure out what customer owns all those vehicles, now they're going to have a customer identification and understand all the vehicles owned by the customer. And that shift allows for a lot more personal connection to the customer. Suffice it to say, the more technology you develop, the more you have to teach people how to help customers use the technology. So you're seeing much more of the training and human service to integrate with the technology and the interface therein, and that is a lot of the future for the brand. Well, the final message here is that the brand was committed to delivering an experience that was engaging the customers, that drove loyalty, that drove referrals, and they wanted to have that be a long-term strategy, not just something that they achieved. If we could just win the J.D. Power sales satisfaction index one time, right? I mean, and they clearly did that, by the way. They went from the middle of the pack in the low 20s in service satisfaction. They've just moved up in the top echelon of delivery on the J.D. Power scores. They also have won the American Customer Satisfaction Index repeatedly. Their scores on satisfaction rival the Ritz-Carlton now. So it's one thing to win all that and have a victory. It's another thing to go beyond creating one hit song and really creating a dynasty or a legacy like the Rolling Stones or other bands who've taken their musical talents and gone beyond one single hit and really have created a real catalog of music. So how do they do it? How do they take all of this? Well, first off, they declared that that's what they were going to do. So the CEO of Mercedes-Benz USA, in his early interviews, once they decided this was the course they were going to go on, went public and said, my legacy will be customer experience transformation. I will be known for the guy who took Mercedes-Benz and we focused all of our energy and our efforts, and our people became obsessed about customers, and that's what I'm going to do. And that's it. I'm going out publicly with it. You can measure me against it. At the end of my term, did I do it? Did I not do it? I'm not going to hide. I'm going to take a stand for this. So he defined what his purpose was. He published it. He lived it. And he asked everyone in his organization to do the same. And so this entire organization was one where people took a pledge to be driven to delight. And lo and behold, they defined it, they published it, they lived it. I've defined it now, I've published it, and the brand is recognized certainly for its transformation in that space. That leader's gone on to other organizations here very recently. He's going to be the leader of the Atlanta Falcons football team in terms of their overall business processes in Atlanta, Georgia. But more importantly, other leaders who have been part of that leadership team are taking over Mercedes-Benz leadership in other countries throughout the world to continue to cascade out this message, given the importance of customer experience leadership. So as you sit in wherever you are today, you may be asking yourself, well, is this my commitment? Do I really want to lead an evolution, if not a revolution, in customer experience for the people that I serve? Will it differentiate me? Will it drive greater emotional engagement on the part of our customers, making them less more resistant to the offers and the discounts of our competitors? And if so, am I able to leverage my people by creating a vision, making that vision seen? Am I able to leverage my processes by helping my people see all of the touch points along the journey that customers encounter and helping us define touch points that really do make a difference along the journey? And then am I also able to leverage technology to make it easier where I can? And then can I develop an interface between my people in that technology so that it's seamless for customers when they go online to brick and mortar, offline, as they move through all of the different channels? Am I looking for ways to seamlessly help them have a relationship with my brand through technology and through people? Well, with that, I think we're pretty much at the end of the prepared remarks, and that should enable us to get to your questions. I want to thank Mile for allowing me to do the webinar. That website right there is driventodelight.com. It will allow you to have all the resources about the book, learn more about the book. You can see some of the maps and some videos and some tools that obviously I couldn't provide in the context of a webinar today. I know I've just made my deck available to the event organizers, so while I didn't want to have it as a distraction during the presentation, I thought that it could be used as an associated resource and provided to you at a later point in time by the event organizers. So with that, I am open, ready, and available to answer questions.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Joseph, for a very interesting presentation. Folks, we are now open for question and answers. If you have any questions, you could either put it in the question box or you could raise your hand. There's a hand icon available on the webinar console, so if you click on it, you will have an opportunity to speak with Dr. Joseph as well. So let me go straight to the question box. We have the few questions already popped up, being the first one. Leaders at Mercedes-Benz USA set a lofty goal when it came to customer experience. Essentially, they didn't just seek to be a best in class. Instead, they wanted to be among the best of the best providers. What is the importance of this level of aspiration?
Well, I think, if you just look around in your neighborhood and you try to beat your neighbors in your particular sector, sometimes that's not even a great sector, and it doesn't really make a difference. I mean, I think about airlines in the United States in particular, not known for delivering a great customer experience. Often people who provide services like utilities and cable, not necessarily known for being great service providers. So if you just aspire to be the best in an industry that is fairly mediocre, it doesn't really differentiate you very much. And most people want to aspire to greatness. If you think about what motivates us, it is purpose, it is autonomy, It is the ability for us to have some kind of challenge to master. So if mastery is important to us and purpose is important to us, we have to create a goal that people will see as doable, I mean, at the far reaches of doable, but something worthy of pursuing. Being slightly better than yesterday doesn't get a lot of people excited. And even, winning again this year like we won last year, often that doesn't work. It really is about having a message to people that says, this is worth going after. And so I think aspiring to be the best of the best is good. Plus, the last thing I would say about that is that your customers aren't just having experiences in your sector, right? So if Mercedes-Benz customers are not just having car purchase experiences, they are at the Four Seasons, they are at the Ritz-Carlton, they get those experiences, and then they come out of there and they walk into a Mercedes dealership and no one is excited to see them, and no one is greeting them by name, and no one is making sure that they're comfortable. Wow, I mean, literally you pale by comparison. So to truly be great in customer experience, you have to go after the best of the best.
Okay, thank you very much. We have another one. There's a new trend going on called help marketing, with online communities being activated to spread word of mouth through customer experience. How do you see its growth and challenges it will encounter?
Well, I think in general, we have always been sharing stories. We are storytellers. We as human beings tell stories. The goal here is to understand, what do you want people to say about you? What do you want to hear in the social and in all the channels that you play in? And then how do you create that story? How do you consciously do the things that make it likely that that story is going to get perpetuated? And then the notion of this is really to be able to create a network of people who proliferate stories. Now, I think here's the challenge of all of this. If it's not authentic, then you will blow up over it. I mean, the millennials are critically skeptical about anything that appears. Now, clearly, the advantage of a online, well-distributed social strategy is that people tend to believe people online more than they do traditional advertisers. But if it ever becomes known or thought that you are seeding stories that are not authentic into a network for promotion of your brand as an experience provider, it blows up. And there are many cases where early on in the social world, people literally had journalists write the stories about their brand, and then they put them out in social as if it were independent reviews. So it's critical, I think, to try to create and seed and build a network of positive customer experience storytelling. It's also more essential that everything that gets told throughout that network is an honest, authentic, real experience of customers and reflects the voice of the customers. And if there's anything that hints to it being contrived, that a disclaimer is provided as it relates to the relationship between the person providing the story and not. I recently did a story in that context where my son had an incredible experience, and I made it really clear that I had no association with the brand, and that I shared the story, even though it was from a relative. That wasn't my personal story, it was just one that my son had shared on Facebook. So I think you have to be very careful, but it's also the way the world is, and if you don't have a content marketing angle that focuses on the customer experience, you probably are missing out.
Perfect. So you addressed customer experience as an element of leadership legacy at Mercedes-Benz USA. Why did you frame it that? Okay, let me repeat.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It was what they framed. I mean, literally, that's the words that were used. Legacy is a weird word, and it's very American and very audacious, right? Like, legacy, get over yourself. Like, why do you think you're so important you're going to leave a legacy? Well, the truth is we all leave a legacy. Either it's planned or it happens by default. Either it's large or it's small. It's all about how much influence lasts after we leave. And many of us are content to create success today that doesn't create significance tomorrow. I mean, our goal in life should be to expend our energy for the maximum amount of impact that lasts as long as it can. And so some about legacy is mentoring the next generation. It's about being willing to do webinars to share knowledge. It's about going to webinars so that you can pass on something you get from a webinar with someone else. That is how we have legacy. We pass on information one to the next, and we help the next generation have an easier time of it. To pick up where we left off. And so part of the goal here was to make sure that this wasn't just about chasing a number, that we had sales numbers or we won on some satisfaction inventory, but literally that we transferred wisdom, learning, knowledge so that we could sustain an elevated state of customer experience. Because so many brands have success that are short-lived, and they forget about continuing to perpetuate that information. They're so busy trying to make the number that they don't actually build the bench strength to make it sustainable.
What are the major challenges you foresee from customer service perspective for Mercedes in coming years?
Well, I think that it's the same challenge that everyone is going to face, and that is more and more of what people are going to experience are going to happen without any people involved. I mean, thank goodness for technology. My life is a lot easier and a lot better, but push comes to shove, you've got to figure out how to make sure you have the right people at the right places when people have questions above and beyond that which technology can address, and when we need somebody to problem solve on behalf of people. So I think that you're going to be able to manage all the big data that's going to come through technology. There's going to be so much information and not a lot of knowledge, right? So a lot of information. How do you take all those data points and analyze them in a way that helps you understand your customer and that you don't get overwhelmed by it all? And then beyond those analysts, how do you get those analysts to help develop the people solutions and put those people in the positions that will bridge the gaps between the technology and deliverable? But the future of Mercedes is going to be your car is going to tell you when your front left tire is going low, and it's going to send that message to the dealer, and the dealer is going to speak to you on the console and say, hey, I just want to let you know your left front tire is getting low. There's a dealership, a mile away from you. You could limp in without any problems, and we'll get it taken care of immediately. We have the product on hand. You'll be out of here in 30 seconds. When you drive in, they'll be able to identify you thanks to near-field technology, and they'll be able to greet you by name. You won't even have to get out of your car. They'll take care of it. It might be a software patch. They might be able to do it while you're driving down the road, just download an update. So there's so much that's going to be going on the data side. That's going to be a big challenge. And then I think making sure that that person who greets you at the dealership is able to take care of all of your human needs. That's going to be a particularly critical one. So it's one we're all going to face, and certainly we have to create the technologies also that are going to serve our customers, or else our competitor will. They'll have an app for that, and we won't. And that's, I think, another part of the future for Mercedes.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Joseph. That really brings us towards the end of the webinar. Before we dismiss out, any concluding remarks that you have?
No, just thank you very much. I hope people will take a moment to learn from Mercedes-Benz, but more importantly, will make a commitment to continuing to elevate the customer experience they provide.
Well, thank you very much. I really want to thank you on behalf of the Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship for your valuable time. So thank you very much, sir, and thank you all of those who participated in this webinar. We are recording it, so please stay tuned to webinar.mile.org for our upcoming webinars, or also how to access our archive section. With that note, we'd like to conclude this session. So you all have a good day, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling from. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much.